It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome back, fellow Quillers, to another exciting episode of Don't Quill the Messenger. I'm excited to welcome back to this episode our friend John Shahan. You know him from previous episodes, but it has been some time now since we've checked in with John about the happenings at the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition. John, welcome back.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be here.
What's going on with the SAC these days?
Well, we continue to add signatories to the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt. It's been 18 years since we first launched the declaration in the UK back in 2007, and signatories continue to come in at a fairly steady rate.
I find that so hard to believe. 18 years. It seems like just a clip of time, but that's a significant amount of time, almost 2 decades now.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. Right. It's been a very eventful period, and we, as I say, we continue to get signatories. So people are still tuning in after all that time, and they continue to sign, and they continue to be a very impressive group of people.
Well, before you give us an update on the latest signatories and the numbers and all of that, let's, for those listeners who maybe aren't as familiar as the diehard Quillers who've been with us from the beginning, let's give them a little bit of background about what the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt is. And then that also gives us an opportunity to tell them where they can find it and add their name to the list as well.
Well, the Declaration started as a project to figure out a strategy for how to advance our movement. And the thing that's unique about the Declaration is that it focuses specifically on the case for the Stratford man. Most authorship organizations are built around promoting a particular authorship candidate. And in a way, that feeds into the Stratfordians' strategy, which is to attack our doubters and our candidates and keep us on the defensive. They prefer to be on offense, attacking us and just assuming that the case for the Stratford man is solid. But they actually don't go into the evidence. As I say, they just assume it and attack alternative candidates. And I'm convinced that this is a very well thought out strategy on their part, and it goes way back. Their aim is to stigmatize and suppress the authorship question by denying that there's any room for doubt at all about the Stratford man. If there's no room for doubt about him, then it really makes no sense, logically, to be investigating other candidates. And this strategy allows them to be just summarily dismissive of all authorship doubters and all of our candidates. And it was the famous Chinese scholar, Sun Tzu, who spoke about, he wrote the book, The Art of War, and he's analyzing how you deal with an opponent, how you defeat an opponent. And it doesn't only apply to war, it applies to any conflict situation. And in that book, The Art of War, he said, the most important thing in war is to defeat your opponent's strategy. And so that's really what I set out to do, analyzing their strategy, which is to keep us on the defensive, deny there's any room for doubt at all about the Stratford man, and keep the attention off of him. So I decided to pursue a strategy of focusing on the Stratford man. And why the case for him is so weak. And that is what legitimizes the authorship question. They want to keep, Stratfordians want to keep the issue delegitimized, especially in the academia and in the media. And really, our number one problem is that it is not recognized as a legitimate issue. And that should be our first objective. The threshold question in the authorship controversy is whether there's any room for doubt about the Stratford man. If there is, then it should be regarded as a legitimate issue. And they denied that in order to prevent it from becoming a legitimate issue. So in the aftermath of the publication of Diana Price's book, Shakespeare's Unorthodox Biography.
She's been a guest here on the program to talk about her book.
Yes, I knew Diana before she published that book, and I was aware of what she was working on and was very impressed with it, and especially her chart of literary paper trails, where she compared the evidence for the Stratford man with the evidence for 24 other alleged contemporary writers of the Elizabethan and Jacobean period. And when that book came out, it seemed to me that really laid out pretty much the kind of evidence we needed to present in order to call the case for the Stratford man into question. She wrote her book for an academic audience. It was published by Greenwood Press, and she was aiming for it to be taught in college English classes, and she gave a lot of lectures on it. The idea that I had was you need to have something that's shorter than that, something that is a definitive statement of the case against the Stratford man, something like, a historic declaration, which would be recognized as marking time. That when you look back on it, what was it that really made the difference in the authorship question? It was this historic declaration that really made the case against the Stratford man and legitimized the issue and got people's attention, because you didn't have to read a whole book. You'd have a fairly brief historic document that would summarize the most important evidence on both sides of the issue in order to make it understandable to the public. I mean, one of the advantages that the Stratfordians have is that this is a very complex issue, okay? I mean, you have to read a lot.
160 episodes later, yes, this is a very complex issue.
And that works to their benefit. Two ways. One is there aren't very many people who are going to do that amount of reading. You have to be really into it in order to do that and read a dozen books to really understand it very well. And the other thing is it allows them to obfuscate, okay? They, they can talk all around the issue and distract people by getting off of the case for the Stratford man and never really addressing it and just attacking their opponents. And if you have something that's fairly brief and definitive that just focuses on the question of whether the Stratford man, whether there's reasonable doubt about him, that would legitimize the issue. And so that was the kernel of an idea that I worked on for several years and consulted many people, principally Diana Price, actually. She was my principal co-author on the Declaration. But I consulted with about 3 dozen scholars, really. And it took about 4 years to write that declaration.
Well, that makes sense because you're talking about a document, as you said, something that you want to become a historical document. And 18 years later, I would say that it's definitely made some very important history and has some important history behind it. But also it's something that if you're asking people to sign it,
yes,
that you can't go back and change.
No.
But once they've signed it, you can't go edit the document and say their signature is still valid. So you had to get it right, didn't you? You needed to make sure that it was comprehensive enough, but yet not so overwhelming
Yes.
that it could be read and absorbed and appreciated by potential signatories who would then say, yeah, I'll put my name to this because I believe there is a reason to explore this mystery.
Yes. Yes, that's right. A lot of, as I say, it's a complex issue. And so many people, when they read the Declaration, don't sign it initially. I would say it's really no more than about 1% of the people who go to the Declaration page who end up signing. And I don't think that's very surprising because they don't know who we are. They don't know if everything in that declaration is valid or not. I mean, after so many people have signed it, and a lot of very impressive people, I mean, we have a whole notable list of people. You look at that and you think, well, I'm going to be in very good company if I sign this. But a lot of people apparently hesitate, and I would guess it's because they're not sure everything in the Declaration is necessarily accurate, but also you have to feel strongly about an issue to want to make a public statement by signing on to a document like this. So my sense is that by the time people sign the Declaration, they do feel pretty strongly about it. And you can tell from a lot of their statements that they make. Each person who signs the Declaration has 160 characters when they can make pretty much whatever statement they want. That's their personal signing statement. For people who say that they're interested in being on the notables list, we ask them to tell us who you are and what's your background and what it is that qualifies you to be on the notables list. And
well, give us an idea of like what those qualifications might be to be placed on the notables list.
Well, one good indication is somebody who has a Wikipedia page, that they're important enough that the public is interested in who they are, and so there's a Wikipedia page that somebody or other has written explaining who they are.
I have an IMDb page. Does that count?
No, we don't look at IMDb pages, but
lousy entertainer. We don't care about you.
Yeah. But it's, somebody who's notable, who's a public figure in some way. I mean, many of them are obvious, Sir Derek Jacobi, Sir Mark Rylance, Michael York, Jeremy Irons, that's just four of our many outstanding Shakespearean actors. Prominent academics. Many of we have a separate page which is just for current and former faculty members at college and universities, and we have over 940 of those now. But the more prominent academics also would go on the notables list. I mean, to be on the notables list, a person has to answer the question, are you someone who we should perhaps consider to be on the notables list, and would you give us your permission for you to be there? And, a lot of even fairly accomplished academics don't consider themselves to be notable public figures, but some of them clearly are. I'll give you one example. Dean Keith Simonton, distinguished professor of psychology at the University of California at Davis. Dean Simonton is widely regarded as the world's leading expert on creativity and genius. He wrote the book, let's see, what is the title of it now? Origins of Genius, Darwinian Perspectives on Creativity. It was published in 1999. I read it in 2001, and I got in touch with Dean, and I pointed out to him that, you've written in this book about all kinds of prominent people who are regarded as geniuses throughout history, but you had very little to say about William Shakespeare You know, why is that? And, you know, he acknowledges that, you know, this is one of the greatest geniuses of all, but in order to write about him, you have to have enough information really to have a biography of this person.
and there's the rub, isn't it?
And you're right. He said there's really not
There's
enough
nothing there.
information to make a judgment about whether this person fits the profile of a creative genius. And Dean is familiar with all of the research, the high quality research that has been done on the nature of creativity and genius, the background characteristics, the developmental characteristics in a person's biography that leads them to become a person who produces these really transformative discoveries and publications that transform a whole field. I mean, genius is not just about IQ by any means. It's about the historical significance of these people's contributions to human knowledge and to our culture and who we are. And when you look at the Stratford man, you just don't see that.
I did a presentation several years ago. It was part of an online, it was during the pandemic, and we were doing an online sort of conference at that time, a small gathering of people. It was at Ben August's home in the Napa Valley.
Yes.
And we were broadcasting live from there. And the presentation that I gave, which I think you can find on YouTube now, I called it Mentors to Genius. And one of the things I talked about was I gave several examples of different geniuses in history and who their mentors were, who their teachers were, who fostered that genius. Because I think you could have genius and it could be in the middle of a farm in Siberia. And if that genius doesn't have access to mentors and educators and people who can shape and mold and foster that into whatever course of study or direction it's supposed to contribute to the world, it could be lost forever. There are probably geniuses in Papua New Guinea living in the jungle who don't have access to anyone to take that clay and shape it into whatever it is supposed to become. And so I think that's important too.
Well, Dean there's the great controversy in genius is it more a product of heredity, genes, are geniuses born, or are they made? Is it environmental? And
doesn't it have to be a mix of both is what I'm saying?
To some extent, but I mean, you have to have a certain basic level of intelligence. But when you look at the people who are categorized as geniuses throughout history, they are not necessarily people with very high IQs. The research shows that above an IQ of about 130, there's no correlation between IQ and producing products of genius. If you've got an IQ of 130 or above, you've got the basic intelligence that's needed. Beyond that, it's environmental. And Dean says that the research is pretty clear on that the idea that geniuses are born and not made, the evidence is pretty bleak for that point of view.
I agree. I'd absolutely agree. I mean, the example I always like to give is I say, well, if Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart had not been born to a father who was a music teacher and composer, if he'd have been born to, let's say, I don't know, a glove maker, he probably wouldn't have produced all of that beautiful music.
Yes, he was born in exactly the right place at the right time, in exactly the right environment to produce Mozart, who he became. And my guess is that's the same thing that happened with Shakespeare. It's not, just that he happened to have an IQ and it didn't matter what environment he lived in. He had to have an environment that nurtured that potential that he had. And so, getting back to Dean Simonton, he's a quintessential example of the kind of person who's a notable signatory. And his knowledge and his discipline is directly relevant to the Shakespeare authorship question. If this guy, leading expert on creativity and genius, looks at what we know about the Stratford man and he says, this man does not fit the profile of a literary genius, I don't believe it. And that's what he came to. When I learned that he had pretty much left Shakespeare out of his book because there wasn't enough evidence, I sent him a copy of Diana Price's book, and he read it. And as soon as he read it, he said, this man was not Shakespeare. Reading this book, what we know about him, that's just convincing. He wasn't Shakespeare.
And so then he willingly signed the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt.
He did, and he became a member of our academic advisory board.
At this point, 18 years later, how many signatories are there?
We have 5,000, just over 5,600 total signatories.
And about how many are added every year, let's say?
In a normal year, when there's no great publicity around the authorship question, we add about 200 to 250 a year, something like that. If there's something that puts the issue in the news, it goes above that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what are you doing right now to put the issue in the news?
Well, not much, I must admit. One of our biggest problems is just getting media attention for the authorship question in general and for the Declaration. The media are pretty much opposed to recognizing this as a legitimate issue. And that goes, way back. And it's largely, I think, because the media are oriented toward expertise. When, they're considering most any issue, their first instinct is, well, let's identify who are the leading experts in this field, and we'll go talk to them. And in the case of the Shakespeare authorship question, that's pretty much orthodox Shakespeare scholars at the major universities.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just shuts them right down. And they say this is a bunch of nonsense and you should not be covering this at all. And occasionally when reporters do cover it, they are attacked. I'll give the example of William Niederkorn, outstanding arts and education reporter for the New York Times, who did a 2-part series on the case for Edward de Vere back in the early 2000s. And Stratfordians ganged up on him and waged a letter-writing campaign, not only to the editor, but to the owner and publisher of the New York Times. And that's part of their strategy to delegitimize the issue.
They got him canceled.
I don't think that William would say anybody ever told him that the reason his position was being terminated was because of that. But, when there are cutbacks in the media anyway, and they're making decisions on marginal considerations about who to keep and let go, people who have been attacked for their authorship views are vulnerable. So I would guess it probably had something to do with it, but William didn't say that.
In 18 years, well, before we move on to the next question that I have for you, I want to make sure that we tell the listeners how they can add their name to the list if they haven't already.
Yes, you just go to our website of the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition. The web address is doubtaboutwill.org. doubtaboutwill.org, and the declaration is there. Just go to the declaration page and read it and sign it. There's a lot more information on our website. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in addition to the declaration to read for anybody who's interested in it.
Well, Quiller Nation, let's give it a spike. So if you haven't already added your name to the list, please consider doing so. We'd love to, after this episode has dropped, see a spike in that signing list and be able to attribute it to the Quiller Nation. So the challenge is out there to you, fellow Quillers. Go to doubtaboutwill.org, read the declaration, and if you agree, put your name to the list. Because if you think about what John, basically what I'm hearing you saying, and I don't disagree, and we've had this conversation several times before, but what you're saying is don't give them a target. Don't say the real Shakespeare was Edward de Vere, or the real Shakespeare was Francis Bacon, or the real Shakespeare was this collection of people working together. Instead of that approach, which causes them to just attack and tear down whatever target you give them.
Yes.
You need to put them on the defensive and take their target down first. And once you can do that, once you can establish the doubt about Will in people's minds and they dismiss the Stratford man and go, okay, that doesn't make sense. It can't be him. Then they'll just immediately, almost instinctively ask the question, well, if it wasn't him, who was it?
Yes.
And that's been sort of my approach too here with the program over all these years, and why I invite guests who have varying different degrees of belief and various different proponents and different targets that they would put up. And because my philosophy is all of that research and all of that questioning and all of that, delving into the mystery only further proves that it's not the Stratford guy.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, it's the threshold question in the authorship controversy is whether the Stratford man wrote the works or whether there's reasonable doubt about him. I go back to, who was it? Stephen Covey, who wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Number 1 on that list is put first things first. The threshold question in the authorship controversy is whether the Stratford man wrote the works. And in the public's mind, that question has never really been answered. And Stratfordians would like them to think, oh, yes, it has been answered. It was clearly him. This is not a legitimate issue. You shouldn't pay any attention to it. Don't go there. It's a waste of your time.
I would argue over the 400 years, that question hasn't properly been asked, let alone answered, is part of the problem, especially in the halls of academia. They don't want the question to be asked.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
And so that was going to lead me to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. So 18 years and, 5,600 names now.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, 900 or so notable names, many of them academics, I would assume.
About 940 academics, and I think we have about 129 notables.
Okay.
Yeah.
So almost 1,000 academics.
Almost. Yeah.
So has that resulted in some sort of a ripple effect? Have we seen the expansion of at least the questioning of this topic in the halls of academia? What kind of progress have we seen in the last 20 years? You have a means to indicate to us some details about that.
I really don't see a whole lot of progress, I must admit.
And didn't the SAC sponsor a poll or a survey to try to determine exactly how much progress there maybe has been in the halls of academia over the last 2 decades?
Not all of academia. We did do a survey focusing just on Shakespeare for professors in English departments a couple of years ago. And this was partly a follow-up survey to an earlier survey that was done by the New York Times back in 2007. And one of the questions that they asked was, do you think that there is good reason to doubt that the Stratford man wrote the works? And only, I think it was 6% of Shakespeare professors said that there was good reason to doubt, and an additional 11% said, well, possibly good reason to doubt. And we were hoping to see that those numbers had increased. And that is not what we found. We found that 95% of the Shakespeare professors surveyed, and we tried to include in our sample really virtually every Shakespeare professor at a college or university in the United States, but 95% of them said no. They saw no good reason to question the authorship of Shakespeare.
So in nearly 20 years, the needle in that location, in among those academics who this is their specialty, this is what they teach, this is their game.
Yes.
In that hall, in those halls, the needle has not moved, not even a smidgen in almost 2 full decades.
Well, we did that 3 years ago, so that would have been after 15 years.
Okay.
But yeah.
But zero momentum after 15 years.
We could not detect any change, no.
So what I would say is stop trying to make change in those halls. Like there's no point to that then. I mean, that's futile, right? That's the definition of insanity, is to try to continue to convince these Shakespeare, professors and experts of any reason whatsoever. So what I would be curious to know is, I'd love to see a survey of history teachers.
Yes.
And see if that has changed at all. Because I believe that's a more productive place to delve into and try to change the paradigm, is with history professors and history teachers, because this is as historical as it is literary to me.
Well, possibly. I mean, you would think history professors would be more open to it, certainly, than English professors. But the problem there is that English professors have really much conceded the Shakespeare authorship question and Shakespeare in general to the English professors. It's seen as in academia as that's their turf. And so we don't go there as English professors. I mean, there are exceptions to that, of course, but I'm pretty sure that any young English history professor who, is talking to their advisors about, exactly what should my specialty be in history, they're not going to advise them to look into the Shakespeare authorship question. It's stigmatized, it's suppressed, it's a taboo subject, and you don't touch it with it's risky to do that. It's risky to your career. So I would guess they don't do that. I must say that when I first issued the declaration, I was, in fact, very skeptical of the idea that one of the main audiences for this would be English professors. It just seemed so clear to me that they were so dead set against it and so close-minded that I did not think that they certainly not that they would be the first group of people who would be receptive to this. I really thought that they will change when the public has changed. When they find that their own students who come into their classes don't believe them, and they know more about Shakespeare, the authorship question, that they do. And when the Shakespeare professors start feeling like they're losing credibility with the public and with their own students, that would be the point at which they would start to change.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And I think that one of the things that we've seen more specifically over, I'd say, since the pandemic, particularly over the last 5 years, one of the things that we're starting to, I don't know that it's a new thing. I think it's been newly recognized and it's being exposed more, is that a lot of college and university experience for students is to be taught, we're the authority, we're the experts.
Yes.
That's why we're the professors.
Yes.
And you will do and think as we do and think, or you will not graduate. And it doesn't matter what the issue is. There is a layer of indoctrination that is occurring on our college campuses, and especially the high-end universities. We're seeing more and more of that.
Yes.
And I think that you're right. I think the idea then is we need to get them before they go to college or university to have them have the idea of the Shakespeare authorship in their minds before they get to that English professor's class, so that when they get to that English professor's class, they ask questions of the professor. Well, wait a minute. I learned this in high school, or I learned this in junior high school, or what about this? You don't even want to address that. Why don't you even want to talk about that? And I think you're right. I think that changes the tables big time.
Yes, it could over time. I mean, it's hard to reach a lot of high school students and introduce them to the authorship question, but I think that's something important, and it is going on to some extent. I mean, ideally, you would get some major event that would get a lot of media attention, and it would go everywhere. All the major outlets would cover this story of some discovery relating to the authorship question, and that would really mark time. And from that point on, it would no longer be credible to claim that, well, there's no reason to question the authorship. Hopefully that will happen at some time, but I don't see what's going to do it. I mean, we were hoping that the Declaration would get that kind of publicity. The only time we were able to do that was when we first launched it back in 2007 with Sir Derek Jacobi and Mark Rylance taking the lead in issuing it following a performance of Mark Rylance's authorship play, I Am Shakespeare. And that was covered by The Observer and the BBC in the UK, and it went all over the world. And within the next 24 hours, we got 700 signatories in that one day. I've been trying to do something similar to that ever since, and we've just never been able to pull it off.
Well, we're approaching the 20th anniversary. Maybe there needs to be a 20th anniversary celebration of some sort that might bring some additional attention to it.
I think that's a great idea.
We have 2 years to plan it.
Yes,
right?
we do.
We're 18 years in, right? So that gives us 2 years is a good enough time to plan something big and something that can be professionally and properly organized, I think. Don't you think?
I think that's a great idea. Yes. Well, I have been thinking along those lines. I mean, one thought is that within 2 years, at the rate we're going, we are likely to go over 1,000 current or former college or university faculty members who have signed the Declaration. And that's the kind of milestone that might be newsworthy.
Milestones are important to news media. It's true.
They are, yes. We'll have over 6,000 signatories probably by then. And really the most important thing about the Declaration, though, is not how many signatories we have, but who they are. Our signatories are a very impressive group of people. I mean, almost 80% of them are college graduates, and almost 40% have advanced degrees. And, as I say, we have all those notables. We have 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices who are signatories, John Paul Stevens and Sandra Day O'Connor. It's pretty hard to dismiss those people.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've got something to build on there, and I think it might be possible to try to stage some type of event in a couple of years around our 20th year anniversary, and give it another try, and hope we can get really big time publicity for it again.
Well, sign me up to help however I can, because this is definitely a cause I can support and get behind, especially since one of the things that I've always loved about your organization is, I mean, we've talked privately about your feelings on who the author is, but that's not the point of your organization. The point of your organization isn't to name the author. The point of your organization is to generate doubt, to generate within any community, whether it's academics or just the layperson, to generate a reason for asking questions, which is what this program has always been about. And that's where you and I have always connected, is it's about making people ask the question.
Yes. As I would put it, is our objective is to legitimize the issue.
Indeed.
It is not recognized as a legitimate issue, and it clearly should be.
Well, and you just gifted me, you brought me a beautiful copy of the Declaration that I am now going to take to my local frame shop and have properly framed. And we're going to start displaying it at performances of Rogue Valley Shakespeare Company productions and see if we can't add to that total a little bit more too. At least at the very minimum, we'll be adding to some awareness. I mean, obviously I don't hide my position with my patron base. They all know that I host this program, and I've already within the patron base developed some new skeptics, if not converts. But, we see more than, it's about 650 to 700 audience members is where we're at right now per season. So that's that many more people who will be exposed to the Declaration, and let's see what we can do there too as well.
Okay, that's great, Steve. I really appreciate you doing that.
One person at a time is, whatever it takes. I just recently had an episode with my friend John Brooks, who's teaching it to high school freshmen. And like I said to him, you have 40 kids at a time. That's making a difference. It's making a huge difference, especially at that age.
Yes.
And 4 years before they end up in a university where they're suddenly going to be taught how to think. Unfortunately. But in my experience and being a former high school educator, that's the level. And my peers and colleagues who teach at that level, that's the level where educators are still inspiring free thought, where they're still encouraging their students to think for themselves, to explore, to ask questions, to find new ways of discovery. And for some reason, when you get to the college and university level, it shifts and it becomes, no, you will do it my way. I worked my ass off and have all these letters behind my name to get here, and I am the authority, and you will respect my authority. And maybe if you're good enough and you study as hard as I have and you follow the right steps, you might make it to where I am someday. And I don't understand that as an educator. I don't understand that.
It's been a long time since I was in school, so I haven't seen that change firsthand myself. But I've heard some things about it. I mean, one great example of that is James Shapiro, professor of English at Columbia University, and he apparently tells his students, like on the first day of school, anybody who asks about the Shakespeare authorship question will be given a failing grade. And I understand that he's even said that in an interview on the radio that he does that. So, I mean, that is just outrageous, closing down, young minds. I mean, how authoritarian can you be? So,
I mean, not to jump into too much of a political realm, but it just, raises the question at this point with all that we've been seeing and hearing about what's going on Columbia University. Is he even welcome there anymore? I mean, he is James Shapiro. He's Jewish. And man, they have gone so anti-Israel and anti-Jewish there. And I wonder how he would think, like trying to draw the parallels. What I'm doing here is, well, if you can be so rigid and say, if you have doubts about Shakespeare, you get an F, you don't belong here. Well, but how is that any different than you're Jewish, so you're automatically the enemy? I mean, I think that there's some parallel there, and he ought to re-examine his positions on certain things, I would think, as an educator in that sense.
You would think. I mean, you would think that the school would have problems with someone taking such a position because it seems so contrary to the idea of academic freedom.
Indeed.
Does academic freedom really mean that much anymore in universities? And, do they enforce it? How do they enforce it? If a student went and complained that this professor is shutting down this whole avenue of inquiry, how would the school respond to that? I don't know. But that might be changing now, actually, because universities are under criticism for the way they operate. And
imagine a science professor saying to a student, "You shall not conduct any experiments using moldy bread." And imagine where we'd be if there had been a science teacher who had said that at one time or another. We wouldn't have penicillin. I mean,
Right.
how can you, you're right. I don't understand how any educator in any field could say to a student, don't ask that question, don't explore. Take it from me, I'm the authority, period.
Right. He's saying that issue has already been thoroughly explored, and there's nothing there. And what they do is they compare it to Holocaust denial. Okay. That's the example that they use, that this is a settled issue, and the research has been done, and it's not open for discussion anymore. And I think in the case of Holocaust denial, it pretty much has been settled. And the Shakespeare authorship question is different. There are good reasons to doubt the Stratford man. There are no good reasons to doubt the Holocaust occurred that I know of. The other example is creationism versus evolution. I mean, I certainly understand that in a biology department, there's not much room for consideration of creationism. So that's the analogy that the Shakespeare professors make in order to justify that position. And I just don't think it's a good analogy.
No, I agree. And I think that that's an issue and a problem. And it's one of the reasons why I have always argued against any strategy or tactic that is attempting to convince the halls of higher education, especially in the English department, of our position or of any of our tactics or of any of our research or anything. I feel like that is beating your head against the wall, and it's a waste of time. And the research that you have that indicates that that's true, since the needle in the 15-year span from one survey to another hadn't moved at all, no matter all that has happened in that time.
Right.
So abandon that strategy, abandon the attack of the tried and true Stratfordian experts, and instead go towards the grassroots effort, the grassroots movement of the common person or the high school student or the person who hasn't already been so indoctrinated into the Stratfordian myth or so convinced that that is their avenue towards success, whether they're going to be an English professor in the future or whatever. I think that's a much better tactic. And that's one of the things that this program has done. And it's why we have listeners all over the world and 3,000 downloads a month.
Right. I mean, I do think it's important to target a broad general audience, the general public, and especially young people who still have open minds about the question. We don't specifically target academics in our communications that we send out. We don't send them out to the English professors. I mean, if we get something in the news, which is what we would like to do, they'll hear about it. Along with everybody else. But we really haven't targeted the English professors directly. We put it out there for the general public. Now, I will say one thing. I mean, I'm just really not the best person to be in touch with what's going on in academia. But a few weeks ago, the Shakespeare Authorship Trust, based in the UK, had a webinar, and the first thing, actually, the first speaker was Mark Rylance, and he was talking about the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt, and he actually read the entire declaration and said that this is an important foundational document for our movement, and it's time we paid attention to it again. I was certainly delighted with that. After 18 years, that he still thought it was important enough that he was going to revisit it, and I didn't know that he was going to actually read the entire declaration, but he did. And so I was delighted with
you
that.
can't go wrong with a Shakespearean actor of his caliber and with his training. You would probably listen to him read the phone book and be enthralled, right? So that had to be very compelling to listen to him read that in such a dramatic fashion.
Yes, it was, and I should say that Mark was also one of the co-authors of the Declaration. He made quite a few contributions to it. Him and his organization, his board members, and in fact, I don't think we would be where we are today if they had not been involved with it, because they have big names there, and it's in the UK. Anything regarding Shakespeare that happens in the UK is much more important and is more likely to get media attention than what happens here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the one who really made that first event go, the launch of the Declaration in the UK. And yes, he was very familiar with it, having worked on it and reread it many times, and he did a great job of reading it, and he elaborated on a few points that he thought were particularly
I don't know
important.
him. I've never met him, but I could imagine that he would be willing to be involved in a 20th anniversary celebration to some degree, don't you think?
Well, I would hope so. One must take into account, though, that he and Derek Jacobi were attacked viciously for having launched the Declaration back in 2007. And Stratfordians are organized to do that, to attack their opponent and their opponents, and they are very strategic about how they go about doing that, and they can make it very uncomfortable. So I can certainly understand someone whose occupation is an actor, not a professional advocate, would not want to go through that.
I would say their careers have sustained quite well despite the attack. It might have been uncomfortable for the first year or two, but I would say now, this many years later, they haven't been hindered, and they've done quite well, and they've transcended whatever stigma was placed upon them for that. And it has been public knowledge now all this time, and they haven't been secret about it during that time. It's not like they went underground about it after being attacked so severely.
Right.
So I would say that the fear and the risk should be by now so limited, especially because then that becomes old news, right? Well, yeah, you attacked us about this 20 years ago. You attack us about it again? Like, nothing's changed in 20 years. We still feel the same way we felt 20 years ago. And in fact, it's 20 years later and the anniversary of this magnificent document that you still haven't addressed. That'd be my approach.
Yes. Well, I certainly understand that point of view.
Yeah.
But it's their decision.
Sure.
And it's their point of view is the one that counts. One thing that I have noticed about trying to get people to sign the Declaration is that people's willingness to sign is inversely related to the extent to which they are a public figure. Okay. The people who are not public figures, who care deeply about the authorship question, are anxious to sign it and would be perfectly happy to put themselves forward and suffer all the slings and arrows and get all the attention. It's the people who are already famous out there and, have something to put at risk who are the ones who are most reluctant to sign. And I'll give you another example of that. One of our patrons, in addition to Mark and Derek, is Michael York.
Mm-hmm.
And within the first year or so after we launched the Declaration, Michael and I put together a list of 14 fairly prominent actors, mostly people in the movie and theater industry, who were known to be Shakespeare authorship doubters. And we wrote a letter to them and sent them a copy of the Declaration, and it was from Michael to them. And we're asking them if they would please consider signing the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt. And not one of them would do that. 0 for 14.
Okay, how long ago was that?
Well, that would have been 17 years ago.
I say it's time to try again.
Well, maybe.
I mean, what do you lose?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is
people
that
change, their outlook changes, their perspective changes.
They do.
The media has changed. Stratfordians' ability to gain headway through their ad hominem attacks, I think, has lost not all, but some of its bite. I mean, when we look at people like, for instance, Elizabeth Winkler, who got nailed and then came back with a magnificent book as sort of her like I bite my thumb at you moment towards those who attacked her for her article in the Atlantic. I don't know. I think that in that way, I think there has been maybe some change, and it's not as risky. And maybe there are people who have read more about it since then, who have more friends in the realm of entertainment who also feel as they do. I don't know. I think it's worth another try.
Well, possibly. But another thing that I have heard about that is that prominent people in the entertainment industry have a norm that they do not ask other people to back their personal causes.
Okay.
That it's
that doesn't make any sense when you look at like the Oscars or the Emmys or any of these award shows where all of these stars get up there and spend their 30 seconds to a minute talking about whatever their personal cause is, as if they want the whole audience to support them in their cause. So I don't know, that there seems to be a juxtaposition there.
Yeah. But for me, though, to ask some prominent person who has signed the declaration, would you approach all of your peers, to do this? They're probably not going to want to do that. And I have to be careful about what I ask, because you can only go to the well so many times.
Well, Michael is a champ and obviously was willing to do that for you.
And for which I am most grateful. Always have been. Yes.
By the way, how is he, by the way? I know he'd been struggling with some terrible health issues and haven't seen or heard from him anywhere in the public eye in a long time.
I haven't either.
Do you know?
No, I don't. I haven't heard anything from him in a long time. Oh, I believe he had multiple myeloma. But he
was very ill.
Yeah, he was very ill.
I hope he's doing well and has recovered to the extent that he can.
I would hope so. Yes.
Great guy. One of the nicest, most unassuming celebrities I've ever met.
Yes.
Yeah. Just a super, super wonderful, nice guy.
Yes. Yes, he is. Right.
I'll never forget. We had a conversation. I tried to get him when I had my Shakespeare Festival in Redlands. I tried to get him to come and be a guest there. And we exchanged multiple emails, and then we had multiple phone conversations to try to make it happen. It didn't end up happening, but one of the things I tried to use as a carrot to lure him to Redlands is the city of Redlands in Southern California has the oldest country club west of the Mississippi River and a championship golf course. And I said, I know people who are members, and we could take you a day on the golf course. And I'll never forget, he said to me, I don't golf.
Yeah.
Perfect way to ruin a walk in the park, don't you know?
Right. Yeah. Michael is a wonderful guy, though. He was always so helpful to me. And he's one who read the Declaration, too. We did a reading of the Declaration, and his reading is posted on our website. So
awesome.
If you want to, anybody who wants to read the Declaration and read along with Michael, you can do that at our website.
You could probably find it on your phone and tap it into your car and listen to it when you drive to work.
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Sure.
Almost like a book on tape.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know in the past, SAC has championed some efforts, some attempts at publicity. There was a debate challenge a couple of different times, I want to say.
Yes.
Full page ads in major publications challenging the question. The declaration has been in print, both in paid formats, I am aware. What is the latest on your strategy board right now? Like, what are you putting time, energy, resources toward as your next endeavor to advance the cause?
Well, we're kind of stuck. We've tried quite a few different things, and a lot of things have not worked, and we don't know quite what to do next, other than what we were talking about earlier, try to keep gathering signatories and meet some of these milestones that might be newsworthy. So we are looking toward the 20-year anniversary as a possibility to do that. Other than that, not a whole lot. One thing that we're doing is jointly with the Shakespeare Authorship Fellowship, Oxford Fellowship, is we're co-sponsoring talks at the annual conferences of the National Convention of Teachers of English, and that's a good place to reach high school English teachers and hopefully convert them and get them interested in talking to their English students in their Shakespeare classes about the authorship question, to at least make them aware of it, so that they understand that there is some doubt about who Shakespeare really was, so that they will be receptive to it when they encounter the issue later in lives. And for those who go on to college and happen to be in English and take a class in Shakespeare, maybe even raise it there with their English professors and hopefully not get flunked out of the class immediately. But beyond that, I don't know. There are a lot of things happening all over the place. And, Elizabeth Winkler's book was something totally unexpected. It turned out to be really good, and that's certainly got some media attention. The Shakespeare Authorship Trust is doing things. And by the way, at that same webinar where Mark read the declaration, I did hear some encouraging words from Bill Leahy, their chairman, and Ross Barber, their director of research, both of whom are academics, that their sense is that it is less stigmatized than it used to be. Not that English professors are, switching sides or anything, but they feel like they're less subject to attack over their authorship views than they used to be. It's just more accepted that, oh, okay, well, you're one of those people, but they've been around long enough that their colleagues know them, and that's the way they are, and so they're not trying to publish them and the way that they used to be. So,
well, I wonder if there's a certain sort of side effect to what's happening societally about how we are becoming, I would hope we are becoming more and more of a tolerant society, or at least we're more aware of the need to be more tolerant of people's choices and their individuality. And there is, the new stigma is to not shame anyone for being different. So, whether it's, we don't want to be body shaming somebody, or you don't want to be misgendering somebody, or gender identity shaming, or sexuality shaming, you don't want to be a homophobe or a bigot. So I'm wondering if maybe to some degree, because that is the prevalent mindset, or becoming the prevalent mindset, that also, well, now you can't go Shakespeare shaming either, because where does that put you? You have a colleague who believes differently than you. Are you going to condemn and ostracize them for that reason? Because that seems like antithetical to the views that you have about anything else when it comes to acceptance.
Yeah. I really don't know. I'm not close enough to it.
That would be interesting I'm going to have to ask some folks that I know in academia whether or not they feel that there might be some kind of a side effect aspect to that going on.
That would be worth asking.
Yeah.
I could mention, that we did help Elizabeth Winkler a little bit with her book, some of the material that was in there. When something like that comes along, we're in a good position to help people. We have a lot of contacts, if nothing else, having so many signatories. So I was able to put her in touch with a few people that she mentioned in her book. And of course, her book is also neutral about the Shakespeare authorship question. So it was completely compatible with our mission for us to do that. So, part of it is, we're still there. We're still collecting signatories. Stratfordians certainly know about us. We are a constant thorn in their side. They must be aware that it really makes no sense any longer for them to try to stereotype authorship doubters as just a bunch of kooks who are incompetent and a bunch of snobs and things, when we have all of these thousands of signatories who clearly don't fit their stereotype. So I think in that sense, we probably keep them on the defensive at least a little bit. I mean, they're hired minions that they have, policing the internet may not care about that, but you don't see the high profile names trying to get away with saying we're a bunch of crazy kooks as much as they used to. I think they leave that to other people.
I'd even argue that some of those names have sort of shied away from entering the fray at all.
I think
they're going back to the original tactic, which is ignore it and it will go away.
Yes.
Type of a thing.
Absolutely. What really got them in trouble was when they tried to respond to the authorship question with the Birthplace Trust. They actually waged an authorship campaign. They were concerned about two things, really. I mean, they were very concerned about Roland Emmerich's film.
Yes.
And that, that might catch on, it might be good, and it might, be a game changer, and they were terrified of that, but they were also afraid of the Declaration and people like Mark and Sir Derek, being out in front on this issue. And so one of the things they did was they published their book, Shakespeare Beyond Doubt, in 2013. And that set them up. It was the first time that the Birthplace Trust had ever written a book about the authorship question. Before then, their position had been, well, it's not worth writing about. There's nothing here. And we blew them out of the water with our book, Shakespeare Beyond Doubt, ? Ours is clearly a much better book than theirs is. And the thing is, when you search on their book title on Amazon, our book comes up first because our book sells better than theirs, and our book gets better ratings than their book. They have stopped promoting that book. They only have 153 reviews of that book, about the same numbers that they had 5 years ago. I mean, we continue to sell our book, and people continue to review it and rate it. But, I think they concluded correctly that it was a big mistake for them to do any of this stuff, because they were taking us seriously, and they put their case out there for the Stratford Man, and we were able to show that it's all wrong.
Yes.
And
well, you sort of you baited them into your strategy, right? Into your tactic. You said, okay, we're not putting up a target. You've put up your target. We're going to shoot it down.
Yes, that's what we did.
Yes,
right.
Indeed.
And we challenged them to a mock trial of the issue, to prove their own claim that the authorship is beyond doubt. And we showed that they were unwilling to stand behind their claim. Mm-hmm. They refused to participate in any such mock trial, even for a £40,000 reward if they prove their case successfully. So as far as I'm concerned, we've really won the arguments on the merits already. It's just that the public doesn't know that. But the Birthplace Trust, in effect, conceded by default in refusing to back up their own claim and stand up to us. So, I mean, to me, there's no room for doubt anymore. It's very clear that the Stratford Man was not the author. If they they know that, okay, they do not believe their own lies, okay. The top people there, their job is to promote the case for the Stratford Man and defend Stratfordian orthodoxy and defend their tourism industry.
Well, I was going to say, no, their job is to sell tickets and merchandise. That's their job.
That's their job.
Yes.
Right. And knowing
it's a threat to their amusement park.
Knowing that, they, among all English professors, have to know the opponent's arguments. And they do. They have read our stuff very carefully, And I do not believe that you can read the Declaration and the subsequent documents that we published and our book that blows their book out of the water, and that they don't know that the Stratford man was not the author. I think they know that perfectly well. But they're like defense attorneys defending a guilty client. Even a guilty client deserves a defense. And so that's what they're doing. They're defending their guy. But do they know that the Stratford man really did not write the works? I'm convinced that they absolutely know that. And
they don't care because he makes the money.
It's about the money, the reputation,
and they keep,
industry.
Some of them, like Jonathan Bate, for instance, that guy. I mean, he comes out with a new book like every couple of years, basically spewing more mythology, stuff that he couldn't absolutely in any way whatsoever back up or show any proof. And it's all, it might have been, it could have been, it probably was, and Shakespeare probably did this, and this play was probably written because of this thing that probably happened in his life that maybe occurred at this spot that we are selling tickets for you to come see. Like, it's such, his books are like tourism brochures now.
Yeah.
Trying to sell you a family vacation to Shakespeare World.
That's what it's about. It's his job to promote the case for the Stratford man and their industry in the UK. I mean, much of their national identity is built around the case for this Stratford man, the commoner that everybody can identify with.
Well, and those iconic, Droschut engraving-based images that you can find on everything from coffee mugs to keychains is a big part of it too. I mean, when you think about it, they've practically admitted that their guy is a cartoon. He's Mickey Mouse of England.
Yes. Well, the Birthplace Trust is a Shakespeare theme park. Mm-hmm. Disneyland for Shakespeare.
It is.
I mean, that's what they have made.
And their
into.
number one character. I mean, they ought to have like people in Will Shakespeare suits walking around with the big giant stuffed head with the big fuzzy collar and the bald head. I mean, they ought to have, costumed characters walking around taking pictures with kids.
Well, they could, except, there's actually a problem with the Droschut engraving. So they've sort of gotten away from that. They don't put that engraving front and center quite the same way they used to. They have this other thing. It's a portrait of, who was it? I can't remember the name of the person right now. It's another person that.
Is it the Ashcroft portrait still that they're trying to use?
No, it's not.
Because that's been so debunked.
It's a prominent young nobleman who got in trouble and was thrown in the tower and ended up dying there. I forget his name at the moment, but
well, there were plenty of those.
Yeah, there's this portrait of him, and it's pretty clear that what the Birthplace Trust now calls their definitive portrait of Shakespeare is really a portrait of this other guy. And everybody knows this. I mean, it was Stanley Wells who put it out there and vouched for it as, oh yeah, this must be a portrait of life of the Stratford man. And, even other Shakespeare scholars don't accept that because it looks so much like this other portrait that is clearly of the other guy. And he's kind of made a fool of himself with that. I mean, that's the sign, the portrait that they put up on all their signs and their coffee cups.
Well, like I said, that's their Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They've created their own Mickey Mouse.
Right. Because the Droschut is too embarrassing now. It's become too apparent that the Droschut is a ridiculous caricature.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's why I say it would look really good as like one of those stuffed characters that walks around theme parks, or a baseball team mascot, how they run around on the sidelines, the big stuffed animal mascots. I think that's what they need. They need to do that. Just be honest about it. They'll still sell tickets.
They would, right? They'd have to rebrand themselves, but people would still be interested in going there just to learn about, the greatest fraud in the history of literature. It's an amazing story.
It is. I think you could actually sell it that way and probably make even more money.
Yeah, I don't know. They seem to have decided, no, they don't want to do that. But
embrace David Garrick as the founder of Stratford. That's what I say.
Yeah.
If you know that history.
Yes.
So you're teaming up with SOF for the high school, or is it high school? It's not just high school English. It's just English teachers of America.
I guess it's just, it's...
so probably middle school too.
Teachers of English,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, so
I used to think of them as
6th
mostly...
through 12th grade maybe.
Yeah. I don't know if there are any, college English teachers who attend these conferences or not, but anyway, it seems like it's a good way to reach.
And so there's obviously some expense involved there. You have to rent a booth, try to secure presentation time slots that probably come with a certain cost. The merchandise to hand to people, some sort of tchotchke or swag or something to give to people.
We take them,
brochures to give to teachers.
Brochures and books. Yeah, we send them a couple of dozen copies of Shakespeare Beyond Doubt.
And why not a website, a QR code, easy to access website with proposed lesson plans on how to introduce this topic to your students?
Well, I think the SOF is planning to do that.
Okay.
It's my understanding. Yeah.
And grade specific, like here's for 6th grade teacher, here's for 7th grade teacher, here's for 8th grade teacher. I mean, I would think that, like, here's the bottom line, being a former educator, and this isn't to indict fellow educators, but if we're going to be intellectually honest, the more work you do for them, the more likely they will use it. Right. But teachers are already sort of, bogged down with lesson plans and curriculum and grading papers. And so the easier you make it for them, the more likely they'll put it to use.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't have that background, so I'm not getting involved in that aspect.
I would say the easiest thing to do is to study like some of these museums and discovery centers that teachers will bring their students to on a field trip. They have great website pages that provide lesson plans for the teachers to use in the classroom before the visit to the museum, then worksheets for the students to complete at the museum, and then a lesson plan for a follow-up after the field trip is over. And it walks them right through it. Like it handholds the teacher right through the whole thing. Because what does the museum want? They want group sales for those teachers to bring that busload of 30 or 40 kids, right? So they make it as simple for them as possible to handhold them right through the whole process. And I think that's the model that you need to follow.
Well, I'll let the experts deal with that.
Great.
It's just not my thing. I recognize the value of it, and I'm willing to support it, but I leave that to the experts. The one piece of advice that I have given them is keep it as simple as possible. Make it easy for the teachers to do it, and these are very busy people. They're unlikely to be able to spend more than one session on the authorship question in their Shakespeare classes, if that. But that's often enough. Just telling your students that there is some doubt about who Shakespeare really was, and that you should be aware of that. And there are various theories about it. It's an unsettled issue, but it's a very interesting issue.
And I don't know if you would agree with me on this, maybe not, but I mean, it's not a secret to anybody that, I'm in the Oxford camp. I'm Team Oxford. I have had guests on this program from every camp and every team you can imagine, and I'm always curious to hear what they have to say and what their positions are and what research they're doing and why they believe in their candidate. But I believe that part of the curriculum should include at least a small bio on like the top 3 or 4 candidates through history, just to give students a reason to look into those candidates and to understand why people believe it must have been someone more like this than it is someone like this. I mean, you would have to put De Vere, Marlowe, and Bacon, at least I would think, up there as like the three
leading candidates.
Yeah, and just to give students something to look at and sort of do a comparative study. And I think that handles, that also hits, and this is a teacher term, established school-wide learning results, ESLRs we used to call them, ESLRs. And every lesson has to include certain ESLRs in order to qualify as curriculum. So I hope that SOF or whoever's involved with putting that together is looking at it from that standpoint and pointing those out. Because if you point those out to the teachers, well, this is this one that we're hitting, and this is this one that we're hitting, and this lesson plan covers this one. It's easier for them to incorporate that into their curriculum and justify it as well. Comparative study is a big one. Right? Teaching kids to be able to draw comparisons and figure out the differences and similarities is huge in education. And so I think that would be something worthwhile doing as well.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a little secret that I happen to know. Some of those people are closet quillers.
Oh, really?
And so they're listening.
Well, good.
Yes. I'm certain of it. Well, thank you, John. It's been a great visit. It's wonderful to see you again, have you right here in my home studio. And thank you for the wonderful gift. As I said, I'll be definitely framing that and getting it up for my patrons of our Shakespeare company to see and consider, and for giving us an update on what's going on. And like I said, it sounds to me like after the co-sponsoring of this appearance at the English Teachers Association conference, the next big project is to work on the 20th anniversary event.
Well, we'll be thinking about it.
Yeah. Let me know how we can help. You know, good friend of the program, John Foss, who you may have met or may have known or come across through circles. He and I worked together and sponsored a great event last spring at the Guthrie Theater in Minnesota. And it was primarily aimed at lawyers, although we did have some educators attend as well from the local universities. Mostly local lawyers getting their continuing learning education credits, but some of them were also law professors and English teachers and some theater teachers too. And it was a very successful event, and we did come away with some converts from that event. And we're looking at planning a similar event to be held at one of the Inns of Court in London.
Oh, I heard about
for
that.
next year. That would be a year early before your 20th anniversary event. But we definitely are going to need to make sure we have a copy of the declaration to have prominently displayed at that event, and I'll keep you informed about our progress, and maybe we can work together a little bit on how that might play out as a precursor to the big anniversary event the following year.
I'd be happy to consider that. Yes,
very good.
I'd heard that you were planning to have such an event.
You know, I don't sit still very well. It's just who I am, you know, and I have a good friend who says about me, and this is probably one of the truest things that anyone's ever said about me. She says, Stephen, you are definitely not everyone's cup of tea. And then she says, that's because you're a glass of whiskey. So I'll take it. I'll take it. Single malt, please. Extra peat on the finish. Yeah, that's...
Take it as a compliment.
I will indeed. And if the whiskey's too strong, I'm sorry. I cannot dilute with water. It's just not who I am. It's not my nature. Well, thank you, John. Anything else you'd like to share? One last time, we'd like to tell everybody, remember the website is doubtaboutwill.org. Doubt, D-O-U-B-T, about, A-B-O-U-T, will, W-I-L-L.org. Doubtaboutwill.org. You can find everything you want to know about the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition, as well as links to the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt, a place where you can add your name and some notes about why you are signing and whether or not you belong on the educators list or the notables list, which we hope some of you out there maybe do. And John would love to see those names pop up. Plus, I would love to get a report from him saying that after this episode aired, there was a spike in signers. So go out there, Quiller Nation. That is your challenge.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think that pretty much covers it. I think it's been a great interview, and thank you so much for having me on again.
Fantastic, John. Always good to see you and always good to chat. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So there it is, fellow Quillers, a long overdue update on the activities of the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition. One more time, I'm challenging all of you in the Quiller Nation to jump on over to the SAC website and sign that Declaration of Reasonable Doubt. If you regularly listen to this program, then you certainly must have enough reasonable doubt about Shakespeare authorship to find agreement with the contents of the Declaration and add your name to the growing list of other skeptics. Remember, you're not choosing a camp on any side of who you think the true author is. The Declaration is a document that merely states there is enough reason to ask questions about the true authorship, and that time, energy, and resources should be devoted toward further inquiry and research into the subject. So visit doubtaboutwill.org to learn more. Real quick, a shout out to those of you who have responded to the John Brooks episode about teaching the authorship mystery to high school students. I have forwarded your emails to John, and he has provided an easy link to the materials he uses in his class. I have access to that link, so if any others of you out there would like to start using it to teach the mystery to students, or if you'd like to share it with an educator you may know, just send me an email and I'll provide you the link. Contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. Write to me, contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. Also, I have a PowerPoint presentation with accompanying text available that I am more than willing to share with you if you want to schedule a presentation at your local library, give a lunch presentation at your noon Rotary Club, deliver a presentation to your book club, or host a dinner party with friends and share a little bit about why this issue means something. The slides and text can be easily tailored as you wish. And as John just spent the last hour sharing with us, the tactic of my presentation, the first part of the presentation is aimed at explaining why this is a mystery. It starts with the anomalies that exist about the Stratford man and why he is a terrible fit for the author. Then it goes into some details and reasons why Edward de Vere is the better candidate. And then it concludes with information for the audience to look into on their own if they are interested in learning more. So again, if you'd like access to that presentation, write to me, contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. And before we wrap things up, I want to thank all of you loyal Quillers for supporting the program through our Patreon page. You are indeed very important Quillers, VIQs in my book, and we are grateful to you for your loyal support, including our May Quiller of the Month, John Eddings. John, we hope you enjoy your free Quiller swag item and that you display it with pride, sparking many conversations about the Shakespeare authorship mystery with others. And lastly, loyal Quillers, my apologies on the tardy arrival of the second part of my bonus feature on Stephen Orgel's book of the play In the Age of Shakespeare. We just opened our repertory season of Hamlet and the Comedy of Errors on alternating nights in True Repertory. Rehearsals 5 days a week, all last month, rotating shows, and a very busy tech week kept me pretty busy. But I now have some open time, so I am working on the second part of that feature. Also, I've been very busy scheduling some new great guests for future episodes that I think are about to blow your socks off. So keep listening and keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.